happiness.
Now, following yesterday's attacks at places of worship in Kibra, religious leaders and civil society are calling for sobriety in the ongoing political discussions. PCA moderator, the Right Reverend Vegu Mutahi, was among those who spoke today, and he joins me now to discuss this matter. Mchungaji, welcome.
Thank you, Bwana Mwangi.
And thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. Now, of course, starting on a light note, we are seeing people stealing sheep.
Yes.
As a shepherd of sheep, how's your flock doing?
Well, it's very sad that people can invade public property and private property and take away animals and enjoy. I could see some of them looking very happy because they have some animals that they are taking home or for sale. Well, it's not a very pleasant thing, but it happened. So we have to live with it and deal with it.
You have to deal with it.
Yes.
Today, you and other religious leaders were in Kibra because of what happened last night.
Yes.
So there was some arson attack at a mosque and a PCA church.
Yes.
What exactly happened?
In fact, we do not have very good details because it happened in the night. Some of our members were there, and there was tension all along the streets. But by evening, nothing really bad had happened. But after 7, some loud youth came over, and they stormed into that compound. And they started damaging anything on site. They had fire. They broke down doors, and they lit a fire in there. There are several premises, and they got into almost all of them. Of course, there was also a lot of stealing. A lot of property was lost. Damage was done, and the place looks a shell when you go in there. It's a very sad situation. Those who know the church, when you look at it, you really weep because it has really been vandalized.
How long did this attack take?
It may have taken about 3 to 4 hours because of the reports that we got, and there were attempts to reach the police, but I guess the police were overwhelmed because maybe they had spent the day running up and down in learning battles, and maybe, I do not know, but they were not able to respond.
By this morning, when you visited,
Yes.
it was yourselves from the Christian faith,
Yes.
and there were leaders also from the Muslim faith.
Yes.
How was the community?
When we got there, the community appeared calm. You could not tell who exactly did it because the young men, the young ladies we found there looked very, very calm people. They talked to us very kindly. They listened to our message. So it was really a very intriguing matter. Who really did it? Because the men we see here, the women we see here are very attentive. They are very keen to hear from us. You know, they're asking us questions. They are telling us they are ready to implement whatever we are telling them. Of course, there was also some blame game. At some point, one community was blaming the other. You are the people who touched this place. No, it's you. You know, and then at some point they said, no, it's not us. There must have been some innovation from outside here. So it was very difficult to really praise who did it because of that, you know, exchange. It was not really easy to tell who did it.
But from your own assessment, do you think there is any religious tension as a result of what happened yesterday?
I would not rule it out because previously there have been some tension, which we have tried to manage through the Interreligious Council. We have visited the place previously, talked with all groups, but it has been there. And who knows, maybe some opportunistic people took advantage of the demonstrations and the riots and wanted now to do what they would not have done under normal circumstances. So previously there have been religious tension, but of late we haven't had any, although there have been a court case that has been going on over that piece of land, but there were no signs. By early yesterday, and even when our people had a service on Sunday, there were no indications that there will be any trouble. Yes.
You spoke and you asked the government to take action.
Yes.
And in fact, you actually placed the responsibility right at the door of the president.
Yes.
What do you want the president to do?
You know, the president took oath to defend life and property. So the buck stops with him. If we are in any trouble, we go to the president because one, he's the symbol of unity, and two, he took an oath to defend all of us. Now that we are in trouble in Kibra, we can only turn to him and tell him, Mr. President, we, your people, are in trouble. We need help. Of course, he may not have to deal with it himself. He has officers who work under him. When we talk to the president, we are talking to his officers. If you go to every other place previously, I don't know whether that's the case today, you'll always find the office of the president. In every constituency, in every county, there is an office of the president. Well, that does not mean that the president goes to those offices, but he has officers who work under him. So even in Kibra, there is an office of the president. And these are, when we talk to the president, we are talking to his officers. But the buck stops with His Excellency, our president. We got into trouble. We lost property of great value. We can only turn to him and tell him to act.
What do you want him to do?
We want...
By act, what exactly is act?
We want, one, investigations conducted. As a church, we do forgive. But to avoid criminality in the days ahead, we need investigations into that matter because a lot of property was damaged and destroyed. We cannot just allow impunity to go on. Investigations need to be undertaken, and once they are done, maybe those who organized, not even the perpetrators, but those who organized need to be taken to account because it will deter them in future from getting into such excesses. Therefore, the action that we want is investigations. We want people apprehended. We want people taken to court and to answer to what they may have not done right. So that is the kind of action that we are talking about.
Okay.
Yes.
Moderator, you know that this is coming also on the back of the demonstrations and the protests that are taking place countrywide.
Yes.
Now again, as religious leaders, you've called on the political leadership to take control of the situation.
Yes.
First of all, is there merit to the calls for the protests as we are seeing?
I wouldn't want to be the judge of whether there is merit or not. What I know is that in our constitution, there is right to protest or right to picket and to demonstrate. That is there. However, I would call for responsibility. Knowing the atmosphere that is in the country, the kind of charged atmosphere we are in, though this matter is in the constitution, I would ask the organizers to weigh and evaluate. Is it really helping? On the other side, government, they should stop brinkmanship of saying, you know, you come out, we'll meet you with fire and brimstone. Because it has not helped. You said so many threats. People still come out and engage police with stones and all kind of missiles. So much as I may not get into the validity of the reasons for the demonstrations, but I would say if I was a leader organizing the demonstrations, I would look at the country and the political tension and make a decision out of that. On the other side, if I was in government, I would look at the situation and say, surely, how do I need to respond to these demonstrations? Because to a great extent, they are valid. How do I deal with them and not offend the constitution, at the same time protect lives and property? So I know it's a difficult balancing act from both sides, and therefore, and that's why they are our leaders. We think they can look at such difficult situations and come up with a good way forward.
Does the moderator of the PCA church support the calls for dialogue?
Oh yes. The Bible is very clear that God calls people for dialogue. You know, in the book of Prophet Isaiah, he says, come, let us reason together. Even when you get into the New Testament, Apostle Paul, when he went out to preach, he would invite people for a conversation. He would go to the marketplace, and he would find Jews and people and Gentiles, and he would say what he believes in, and they would ask him questions. He would answer them. Some of the questions were rude, but he took time to listen, and in the course of listening and engaging them, A number of them became believers. So we believe in conversations, we believe in dialogue, and we believe that this matter that is facing our country, if our leaders took time and and avoided tough positions, dialogue can be entered into, and good results can be arrived at.
Who should begin?
The president. As I said, he took the oath of office. He's the president to Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Much as Raila Odinga says he does not acknowledge him as president, but the fact that he took office, he is the bona fide president of the Republic of Kenya. And therefore, he is the one I would expect to initiate a dialogue between him and the former prime minister.
Now, as a member of the National Council of Churches of Kenya,
yes,
the Interreligious Council of Kenya, you sit right there when you talk about religious leaders and their role that they play.
Yes.
Do you think you have any role to play in shepherding this dialogue that you want to see?
We do have a role because, as you have said, at the interreligious level, at the NCCK level, we have done that before. We have brought leaders together. You remember when there was a time when the IBC had challenges and the opposition wanted it out. It is the NCCK and the interreligious groups that did what is called shattered diplomacy. They visited the president, they visited the former prime minister, and gradually they were able to bring them together. And that's why even when constituting the IBC, you realize that our voice is also part of the formulation of the IBC. Therefore, we have done it before. We are willing, even today, and we shall not tire. In our forums, we have already said that we'll do shadow diplomacy. We are going to visit our leaders. I know they have been busy, so we have been trying to get appointments, and it has been a bit difficult now. But we still keep on trying because the Bible tells us to keep knocking, and the door will open. We'll knock at the door of the president. We'll knock at the door of the leader of minorities, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, and all leaders, and try and tell them. And we meet these people. They are some of them are our members, and we tell them, men, women, you have to start dialoguing.
So have you directly spoken to Raila or the president over this matter?
No, on this matter we have not. But you remember after the announcement of the results of the elections, shuttle diplomacy was done to all of them, including the former president, the president-elect, and Right Honorable Raila Odinga. For now, attempts have been made, but we have not been successful, and we cannot blame anyone. It's because these things did not start very long ago. And you know our leaders are busy. As we speak now, the president is out of the country. Even if we wanted to reach him, and we would wish to meet him first, even as we meet the others, we would wish to meet him first as the father of the nation, and then, escalate or de-escalate the same to the other leaders. So attempts have been made. We have had our meetings, and we have agreed that's the way to go.
Do you have a proposal of how this dialogue could take place? If you were able to reach the president today and Mr. Raila Odinga today, what would you place before them? What kind of roadmap would you give them towards this dialogue?
We, as religious leaders, we wouldn't want to structure the dialogue ourselves, but we want to give them the meat to put into that skeleton. We want to tell them that the country is divided. If we are to go by the IBC results that were given, the country is divided. And therefore, it needs to be handled with a lot of care. Hearing has not fully taken place. There are those who believe that Raila would be president, and they gave him a lot of votes. He may not have succeeded to become president, but they were sentimentally attached to him. So what do you do with him, Mr. President? That's what we would tell him. You are their president. And they believe that Raila ought to have won. Or some even believe he won. How are you going to handle them because of that emotion that they are carrying with them? On the part of the former prime minister, we tell him now, we learn the entire list. We went to the elections, results were announced. Then there was time to go to the Supreme Court. We went to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was able to pronounce itself on the matter, and the president was sworn in, just as the Constitution states. We went to Moi Kasarani, It was done in the open. The president took office. So why would you want us to say that he's not president? And maybe he would tell us why he would want us to believe that His Excellency is not president. But we would want to engage him on that matter. After that, then we would tell them, you are responsible men. With the kind of following you people have, and you are known not just in East Africa, but in the entire Africa and in the entire world, you need to live for others. You can't just live for yourselves. Our president, you can't live for yourself. You are the president of the country. You have taken an oath. Right Honorable Raila Odinga, you have a great history. And you have, we respect you a great deal. You can't afford to throw away that. Let's now talk and say which is the way forward. I would want them to, we would want them, so to speak, to themselves decide how they would want to manage this matter. Because I believe, even if they never shook hands, and each one of them spoke kindly of the other, tensions would come down.
Right, Reverend Mutahi, what would you respond to accusations and allegations from some quarters that the church has been compromised in the political space?
Well, we are a human institution, much as we aspire to be divine. So we may have made mistakes, I would agree, that there are times we have been seen like, we are biased to one side or the other. However, the ideal church should never be partisan. And that is the ideal church we aspire to, or aspire for every day. When you read the Bible, you realize that even the disciples, later the apostles who walked with Jesus, also made mistakes along the way. And they had to be called to order. So as a church, sometimes we need to be called to order, because we may have become a bit too much worldly, forgetting that we have a divine role. However, that does not negate our responsibility as the light and the salt of the world. Meaning then that the mistakes we have committed, we are sorry. But it's not just mistakes, because the church, again, if you look at the country, the church has made a very important contribution. There was no education in Kenya if it were not for the church. The government is a late comer in provision of education. It is the church that started schools, the so-called mission schools.
Yeah.
It also started mission hospitals. It also taught people, great trades like farming, masonry, carpentry, printing, everything.
Good old days,
yes.
Reverend Mutahi. But
it continues.
At present,
yes,
that accusation is that this church, being the light and the salt, you've dimmed your light, you have lost the taste of salt. Should you not first be dealing internally as religious leaders, as a church, in dealing with your own transgressions, then before you come and start gaining back the trust of your flock?
I can tell you that we have done. We have had very difficult meetings among ourselves, looking at one another in the face and saying, you see, I think we haven't done it right here. We have done it in-house. However, if you go into church history, the church has never been void of such, mistakes. The church has made mistakes in the past. And as I've told you, even during the days of the apostles, they also made mistakes. But the work they did still, is still outstanding to this day. Therefore, even if we have made mistakes, the mission and the call of the church and the religious organizations is still very valid. It is still very needed. Listen to everybody. They'll ask, where is the church? Much as we may have made mistakes, you go to the media and they will ask you, what is the church saying? You go to the public and they'll say, where is the church? When people get into trouble, for instance, when people are driven away from their homes, naturally, where do they go to?
The church.
They go to the church, and that's where they seek a new home, because they know that churches are very helpful. When there is hunger, when there is starvation, the church has been in the forefront of providing food, of providing shelter, of providing clothing to people. Therefore, the church is still very respectable. Mistakes have happened, and they used to happen even in the early church, but that has never dimmed the light of the church. So we are still salt with a lot of flavor, Boramwangi. We are still shining all over, and that's why people are still taking us very seriously.
Good. As you accept that this is what's happening inside the church, now let's look at the two political formations. Start with the president,
yes,
and the Kenya Kwanza administration.
Yeah.
Do you think the last 7 months they've actually taken the reins properly and they're shepherding the country well?
I would say that we started very well. after we went through what the Constitution had stipulated in formation of government, the president being sworn in, and then he started, forming his government. It's like there was a lull. It's like everybody was saying, let's wait and see. But I don't know what really went wrong, because about 3-4 months later, and I want to put this blame on the government, because they came to our churches and they started talking about the other side. Not once, not twice. They would go to a church service, which is a good thing. And we were very happy they were coming to church. Then at the end of the service, then they would take to the podium and they would talk about what the other government had done wrong, what the previous government had, the liabilities they had inherited. And I think they overdid it, because the other side now started getting ammunition to respond. And they responded in kind. They may also have overdone it when they started responding. And that's where then ultimatums started coming. And after that, then we got a matter of, demonstrations will start. So I would say that if we had kept the tempo after the swearing in of the president, expectations were high and we wanted to give government space. But a few mistakes on both sides may have led us to where we are today.
On the side of the minority, as we conclude, do you think they are playing their role properly?
I would say yes and no. They are playing their role because they are supposed to keep on pointing on what government is not doing right. However, I would not expect them to engage in what we would call alertness, where they keep on, demonizing, for lack of a better word, everything that government does. We know for sure that there are things that this government has inherited that may not work to its delivering as quickly as we would. For instance, the long drought spell, that has worked against the government. Of course, we know there are factors out there, like the Russia-Ukraine war. We also know that there is depression. We see how our sharing has been behaving. So these are matters beyond government. Any government that would be in power would be affected by those factors. Therefore, I would say, for one, the opposition is playing its role because they are pointing out where government is not delivering. But at the same time, that's why I said yes and no, they could be overdoing in that every item that goes wrong, they point a finger at government. Again, it's too soon. The government is just 100 a year old, so it needs to be given time. But again, looking at the government, I tell government, come on, you can't keep on blaming those who are before you. It's time to take responsibility.
You're the ones in leadership now.
Yes.
Right, Reverend Thegu Mutahi is the moderator of the PCA Church. He's been our guest. Asante sana for joining us.
Thank you.
Keep it here for more.
Time for another break. In business news,